we've decided to try to find our ancestral roots in Europe with the chance of possibly getting citizenship so we can stay a little longer in Europe every time we travel. It's been an experience, hasn't it?
It has been. And, this is my story, I guess, because we were looking for my paternal grandfather, great-grandfather's side of the family. And this, goes back since I was a child. I was told that I was Hungarian and that my father's family was from Hungary. And there's been a series of, of unfolding, of learning, of really,
and
surprises.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about that TV show.
Finding Your Roots, right?
Finding Your Roots, a PBS show.
Yeah.
And it's been a real eye-opener. And I think this video is particularly interesting for those of you who are also looking for your roots and also looking maybe to find some answers that you just can't find with the current resources that you have.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of us maybe have done like those DNA tests, and you come back and it says you're 72% Antarctican and 1% from Mars and 30% from Venus or whatever. But usually it lines up with what you think. I have a funny story about that. I have a friend who has an Irish last name, and he went and he did his DNA on Ancestry.com or 23andMe or whatever it was, and it came back and said he was 100% Scottish, and he thought he was 100% Irish. And when he found out, he knew he was adopted, but he didn't know that his adoption was from someone who was Scottish. So anyway, it was kind of interesting for him. But for you, you found out some very interesting things. And one of them was you're not Hungarian.
Yeah, I'm not a Hungarian, but, kind of back up a little bit. So I didn't know my grandfather very well. He died when I was young. I never knew my grandmother. I never knew my great-grandparents on my father's side. They died way before I was born. So I really didn't have a lot to go on. And I didn't think about it that much. And it wasn't until Chris and I took a trip to Europe. We went to Budapest. We went to Vienna. We went to
Austria and Munich.
Munich, right, in Austria. And while we were in Budapest, I was like, well, I'm Hungarian. This is where my grandfather is from. Yeah. And so we thought we would do a little bit of sleuthing, a little bit of ancestry. And I remember...
Yeah, go ahead.
The first morning we were there, we were sitting in a coffee shop and we were talking about it. We were making plans on going to the cemetery that was outside of town. And there was a woman who overheard us talking and speaking English, and she was intrigued, and she
says, "Are you guys American?" We said, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, I am too." Or I don't know if she was American or she's lived in the States for a long time, but she spoke English really well, and she also spoke Hungarian. And she says, "Well, what's your last name?" And Steve told her, and she says, "Well, that's not a Hungarian name.
Right.
Like if it was a Hungarian name, it would be however your name would translate in Hungarian." And she says, "I don't think you've got that right."
Yeah, Chris didn't really see it as being rude. I kind of thought that it was a little bit strange that she was saying, you're not from around here.
I thought it was more like a language thing from her point of view. Like I speak English and I speak Hungarian, and that doesn't translate. I think the point is,
it was one of those. It was kind of like the first hint of the history.
Maybe things aren't what you know.
The history of these places. Yeah. Anyways, after that same day, we did go out to the cemetery, and it was interesting, and that's a whole other story. Yeah. But we really didn't discover anything. We really didn't learn anything new. So the rest of the day, it was kind of like, okay, well, that was interesting, and really didn't think much more about it.
Well, I want to stop for just a second. So the reason why we wanted to pursue Steve's genealogy is because the laws in Europe right now favor people that have close ancestry, like 1 or 2 generations. And because he had some evidence that his family had immigrated in 1900, and it was his great-grandfather, he was in that generational timeline that he may be able to get ancestry through that timeline. My timeline is super old. My family's been in the States for many, many generations. And so I couldn't pursue English or Irish or German, which I'm from. I was way too long ago, but Steve still was recent enough.
Yeah, so again, fast forward. So this is about, well, now we're full-time travelers starting in 2021. We're spending a lot of time in Europe and talking about, gee, we'd like to be able to stay in Europe for longer than 90 days because that's the Schengen rule. If you know anything about Schengen, having to leave every 90 days.
Yeah.
So there's a program called Citizenship by Ancestry is what you're talking about. It's a way to get citizens. So it kind of opened the books again and started having us looking at that. At the same time, my niece was doing some ancestry work on Ancestry.com. Mm-hmm. The problem with that, as we were looking at that, is that it basically has everything from when they arrived on Ellis Island until now. So prior to 1900, prior to them arriving in the United States, had very little, if not no, information. In fact, I'm going to put up a little shot of the ship's manifest. Was really the most information that we have that said that they were from a town in Hungary, and it's got lists all the names of those people.
Cusco. Anyway, we can never pronounce it right.
Yeah. But that town doesn't exist. So as we're starting to do some of our own searching, we realized that wait a second, there's no such place.
Yeah, so we actually Googled. We were Googling the city that was on the manifest, and nothing came up. And I think I found some sort of record in one of the Mormon records that had some cross listing of cities before World War II and cities after World War II. We found your dad's town on that list, what the new name was after World War II, and where it was. And what'd you find out?
Yeah.
The city was where?
It's not in Hungary. It's in Slovakia.
Yeah.
So the secret here is this area has gone through a lot of changes. So before World War One, we're talking about this is in 1900 when they left. It was the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and most of the names in this area was controlled by Hungary, and they were Hungarian names. After World War I is actually when they started changing all the names back to the local names or the names that they are now. And so over a period of time, everything changed because they weren't using Hungarian names anymore. And then, of course, it was Czechoslovakia for many, many years before Slovakia finally got its independence. So a lot of history.
I got to hold on a second. So first of all, who are we? We're talking about your past.
Who are we?
These people don't even know who we are. So I'm Chris.
Hi.
This is Steve. We're with Eat, Walk, Learn. Here's our website. If you want to go take a look at our website, eatwalklearn.com. If you're wondering where to travel, how to do a nomad life, where to hike, or eat really great vegan food, that's all on our website. And anyway,
we learned some information. We have a tip on actually where my family is from, and I'm Slovakian. I'm not Hungarian. But then it was really down to we need to go to this area because there's just so much that you can do.
Well, hold on. I want to address this for just a second. We didn't need to go. We had the choice and we had the opportunity to be able to go. I mean, in our lifestyle, we travel full time. We're full-time nomads. We can go anywhere we want. And this was just something that was really interesting, and we had the opportunity to be able to go. So we looked at our 90 days of Schengen time, and we thought, well, how can we cut that up so that we have enough time to go to Slovakia, get on the ground, find the towns that your family is from, maybe hire someone to help us, and maybe unravel a little bit of this Hungarian-Slovakian mystery and see what happens. So exactly. You ended up going, checking out a Facebook page.
Yeah,
right?
I went to a Facebook page on Slovakian genealogy and started, reading some posts and learning about other people and their path and finding their ancestry. And asked, a couple of questions about, this is what I'm looking for. And I got referred to a person who does this, for a living, who has Slovakian ancestry. His name is Michael Razis.
Michael Razis. So, Michael, thank you. Sorry, we're mispronouncing your last name. Thank you for coming to our rescue. So, Steve reached out to him, sent him an email, sent him some of the information. He then did a little bit of research and figured out some of the geography and figured out where Steve's family was probably from.
Right.
So we flew into Warsaw and Krakow. We drove down to Slovakia. We stayed the night in a town nearby. He picked us. We did a little Renaissance the first day, and found the Jewish temple where your family probably worshipped, which was
the
that
synagogue
was really
in,
temple the
synagogue in Prasov, which was it had some really interesting museum and some Judaic artifacts, which was really fascinating. And also to again realize this is the first time that we were close enough to where my family was from that they very possibly could have been in this building and have been to services there and have prayed there.
For me, I mean, it wasn't even. I mean, Steve is definitely my family, but it wasn't even my family, and I was like overwhelmed with emotion by thinking that I'm in an area where Steve's great grandparents would have worshipped. So that was like very, very emotional. So anyway, so the next day, Michael picks us up, and he takes us to the town where Steve's dad was from. Now this great granddad. This town is like this big. It's got maybe 27 people in it or something. Anyway, we get there and Michael says, "We've got some people to meet." And we're like, "What?" And what happened?
Yeah, he took us to the to City Hall to meet the mayor. And of course, Michael is fluent. He's Slovakian. So he's doing all the translating, and this is great. We're having this wonderful conversation. And then he says, we've got the oldest man who lives in town who has some memories of, many, many, many years ago. He might know something.
Again, they're all speaking Slovakian and translating and stuff. And got a chance to ask the oldest man in town if he knew Steve's family or anything about that time period.
Yeah, he didn't know a lot. Again, a lot of things happened between 1900 and 1939. Yeah. There was a lot of people that left. In fact, it may have been like the entire town had possibly left. But he did remember one Jewish family that lived right there in the center of town, and then they contacted the oldest woman who lives in the village, in the town. And we walked down a few doors into a little apartment, and
we got to go into her house.
Greeted us, invited into her house.
So there's this tiny little apartment that was in it may have been an old house that had been converted into apartments or something. And she brought us into her kitchen, and we sat. She was she was 87, I think she said 88, something like that. Her name was Anna, and she was so joyful to meet us. And she, unfortunately, she was not old enough to have met Steve's family, but she had also remembered the same family that the oldest man had remembered. And she had some stories to tell.
Yeah. It was really interesting how, as she was a child, she played with their kids. They were all the same age. They lived right next door to each other. And she said that she would go there on the Sabbath to help them out because the Sabbath is a day of rest, and she would do things like help them light the fires and things like that.
Gather the wood and so on. And she was best friends with the girl that was her age. They were like 7 or 8 years old. Yeah. And
to see this woman who is, I think around 90, remembering her childhood when she was 9, maybe years old. And it was pretty incredible.
And she had really fond memories. Sadly, when that family was taken away, on their way out of town, they left some tchotchkes for her kitchen. She didn't have them anymore, but she remembered them very well. And then as we were leaving, she just kept hugging me and wouldn't let me go. And I almost felt like I was somehow a connection for her to a friend that she had that she never knew what happened to her friend. Yeah. So it was, this is really sad history we could talk about here, but the really happy history is that it was a nice connection that was warm and friendly and kind and sharing, and came about because we had this genealogist who was able to get us a meeting with the mayor and the oldest man in town and the oldest woman in town. And it was and Steve got a chance to go to the town that his father grew up in, see all the houses, see where the city hall was. Grandfather, sorry. See all the houses, see what things look like, see what the agriculture was, and just kind of get a feel for what life might have been like when his family was there.
Right.
So then after that,
right, from there, to not make even more depressing, we went to the cemetery in the adjoining town, much bigger town, and the cemetery was quite large, but it was on a pretty significantly steep hill and incredibly overgrown. So this is a cemetery that has not been maintained. We were able to walk through and read some of the gravestones, but really not enough, and really not enough information that we could find to really know if I had any other family members who might possibly be buried there. But there's a really good chance, since that's also the area where my great-grandmother was born. So the next adjoining town over is where she was from, and that's where we went to next. First, we went to the official records office, and everything is manual. Nothing has been digitized. So
but it has been cross-referenced and indexed. So it's not like you have to look in really old books. You have to look in an indexing book, and then they pull out the record. But it was I've done a lot of genealogical research. This was very complicated. Obviously, it was in languages we didn't understand. Again, Michael was just an angel by being able to look through these indexes, navigate what we needed to find. We found a couple references that we thought might be relevant for you. They ended up not being relevant, but what he did was help us learn how to use the resources. And if we want to go back, maybe have some luck in trying to do a little bit of our own, or hiring him again to help us. But it was it was really eye-opening for the types of records and that are available, and how to go about and find them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really didn't mention that in the meantime that Michael had found the birth record for my grandfather. So as far as filling out the forms that we need to be able to complete the application for possibly in the future for citizenship by ancestry, I feel very confident that I've got the right information there, and also names and places and things that weren't exactly what I thought, because I realized that how names were changed when they came over from the old country. They weren't using the same names that they used. They Americanized their names. So it was really interesting.
We ended the day by going to where his great-grandmother was raised, and met another wonderful couple there who had wonderful stories of the Jewish population in their neighborhood and the history of them also in their neighborhood. So even though we all know the history of the Jews in Slovakia is not strong and not happy, our experience of meeting people and finding Steve's genealogy and going to the towns where his great-grandparents grew up was super happy and I don't know if it's happy, but very rewarding and satisfying.
It was, and we were greeted with open arms, and people really, wanted to help, and really appreciated our journey in searching for the truth and searching for my family's history. Yeah.
So just a couple tips for you if you are thinking about doing your genealogy, your ancestry by citizenship by ancestry genealogy. Ancestry.com will get you to some places, and we'll open up some doors for you. But I think you spent, €300 for a day of time with Michael? That money was well spent, well worth it, and saved us weeks and weeks and weeks of research that we probably wouldn't even have been able to do. So if you're thinking about coming into Europe and actually getting deep into your genealogy, really consider hiring a genealogist. It will be well worth your money. And if you need Slovakian genealogy, we certainly can recommend Michael.
Yeah. Fantastic experience. Really exceeded my expectations. The only thing I say is I'd like to have been able to, see their home, where they lived and whatever. But, so many things have changed, and things are just, they've gone through, modernization programs, and old buildings have just been rebuilt. So there really is not a lot of physical evidence, but to be able to make that connection and to be able to have a resource like Michael to help us navigate that was just so valuable.
Yeah. So we hope this has been helpful for you, giving you some tips. Help Steve migrate from being a Hungarian to a Slovakian. It was a wonderful experience, and we hope you can have a similar experience if you go and chase your roots in Europe. We'll see you next week.